Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from around the world. My name is Drew Betts. I'm a network solutions engineer focused on networking at Cisco. And today we're going to be talking about automating network operations. But before we do, I wanted to mention our new name for this webinar series. It's Networking Insiders. We rebranded a little bit because we thought about the purpose of this session that we do every month. And the reality is we want to share the latest at Cisco to you on topics all around networking. So we have all of the folks, all the insiders at Cisco joining us every month. And today we're excited to have insiders around workflows as well as our partnership with BlueCat Network. So it's an exciting rebrand and I'm happy to have it. Now, when we think about automating the network, I think there's two key inflection points that are going on right now. There have been multiple generations of network automation that's come out over the years. I think back before the pandemic of software-defined networking, as well as programmability within the network, all these things have evolved over time. But one of the barriers to get involved in actual programmability and automation in the network was really that you either had to know how to code or you had to know how to work with really complex tools. So what we've been doing at Cisco and across the entire industry is trying to simplify things with low code, no code options. And at the same time, we also have AI large language models that have been flying into our personal lives, into our work lives as well. And with the combination of simplicity as well as AI LLMs all coming together, I think this is a really interesting pivot point for the world of network automation. I'm excited to hear more about what we have to share today as well. So before we dive into the program, I wanted to share with you a new YouTube channel that we stood up. It's called Networking Insiders. So if you just go to Google, type in Networking Insiders YouTube, you'll find our channel. This has over a year's worth of content already posted to it from past sessions, as well as today's session will be posted there as well. Now, as far as the agenda today, it's real simple. It's in two parts. The first thing we're going to do is introduce Cisco workflows to you. We're joined today by Ed as well as Jamie from Cisco, and Ed is our technical marketing engineer leader for workflows. So he's started the product from the beginning all the way to bringing it to market, and he's going to talk to us about workflows today. And Jamie is a peer of mine in networking sales, and Jamie's been working with many customers around workflows use cases, and he's got a few good ones to share with us as well today. Now, the second part, or part two of today's program, is going to be all around automation with BlueCat networks. So BlueCat's here joining us to show how they can interact with Cisco networks that you guys are operating today and make things all work together harmoniously better together. So it's all good stuff. And from there, what I'll do, Ed, is I'll hand it over to you, sir, and let's go ahead and get started.
Great, thanks, Drew. Let me
Of
share
course,
the
man.
screen here. Hello, everyone. Ed Novak. I'm a technical marketing engineer from the network platform team, and I'm here to talk about Cisco workflows. So today we'll do a quick introduction to Cisco workflows, talk about what it is, why we built it, and then cover the roadmap and jump into a live demonstration. Please post your questions into the Q&A or chat area. To start off with, why do we build Cisco workflows? We know that network engineers want to get involved in automation, but a lot of them don't have the time or interest in learning things like Ansible or Python. So looking for something that's simple, easy to use, really a low, no-code automation solution that's simple drag and drop for them to utilize to automate things like APIs. And so we wanted to reduce those manual tasks to help them to create automation simply and easily to simplify their daily operations. We want it to be a Cisco branded solution that would improve time to value with an AI focus. And so that's what we started out with as our goal to build Cisco workflows. So if you're working with networks today, you're probably not working with a simple individual network. You have, for example, Meraki for a branch and Catalyst Center for your campus environment and Catalyst SD-WAN stitching those together. And you probably have things like ICE for NAC. You're integrating with ticketing tools like ServiceNow or Jira. You may have a Netbox for IPAM. So lots of different dashboards, lots of different places to make configurations. Or if you make a typo someplace, where do you begin to start trying to troubleshoot that? So you have these error-prone processes and time-consuming tasks for network engineers that are already overwhelmed with just trying to manage their network, let alone trying to add automation on top of that. So that was yesterday. We're going to try to move to today. We're going to try to bring you a single, simple, one common dashboard for automation, not only across Cisco, but also across third-party tools as well. And that's where Cisco Workflows comes into play here. So Cisco Workflows, what is it? It's a cloud-hosted automation solution that's embedded directly into the Meraki dashboard. But just because we're hosted in the Meraki dashboard doesn't mean we're only for automation of Meraki networks. You can automate across different Cisco domains like Catalyst Center, Catalyst SD-WAN, ICE, Thousand Eyes Umbrella, but also integrate with third-party tools like ServiceNow, Jira, Netbox, and there's also AI integrations as well. And it's like, that's great, that's wonderful, but you don't have to build your own automations. We have an Exchange catalog that offers pre-built automations. You can take those, run those as is, or if they don't quite meet your need, open up in our simple editor, drag and drop simplicity here, and either customize those or build completely from scratch to build those automations, making APIs simple and easy to use. So the whole goal here, eliminate those repetitive manual tasks, eliminate those data entry errors, and get you to automating your networks. So this is all part of the unified platform strategy. So if you've been a Meraki user for a number of years, last year at Cisco Live in June, there was a major change to the Meraki dashboard. It changed from green to blue, have a commonality with Catalyst Center. That's all part of the common user experience that's going on across Cisco. Other teams are working on things like common API and common policy, and I'm from the workflows team. We're about common automation. What that means is that there's multiple teams inside of Cisco, but we all share the same common automation engine. We have different development teams, but we're contributing to the same common code base. So this is going to allow us to accelerate feature velocity here, but we still maintain our individual domain focuses. So for workflows, we're focusing in on network automation orchestration, and on the XDR team, for example, they're focusing on security automation incident response. And if you've worked with XDR Automate, that's been around for several years now. It's a very mature product. We're following that same model. Let's take a look at some of the user interfaces and features for Cisco workflows, starting off with that workflows exchange. So here you see that community-driven models and community-driven solutions in here, but there's 3 levels of offers available here. There's going to see Cisco managed. Those are written and supported by Cisco. There's Cisco verified. Those are written by partners, reviewed by Cisco, and then supported by the partner. And there's also community offers. Now, community offers are also reviewed by Cisco to make sure there's no malicious code and the logic's intact in there before they're published into the exchange. So anything you see in the exchange has been reviewed by Cisco. Just the support model can be different on that. And the exchange has been very successful on the security side of things. XDR Automated Security, they have almost 2,000 different offers in their exchange. We only have a couple dozen there right now, but we have an ever-growing backlog as more and more people are getting comfortable with using workflows and contributing to that exchange model. Then we move into the workspace. This is why I call this your collaborative automation environment. You can have GitHub integration here for syncing workflows. You can also import and export individual workflows as a JSON file. And you can start controlling permissions on workflows, see the owner, see the status of those workflows. And then it allows you to drive into your workflow into the editor. And the editor here is that heart and soul of Cisco workflows. Simple, low, no code, drag and drop editing. On the left-hand side, you have a list of activities. We group these by what we call adapters, but they're really grouped by Cisco domains. So you'll see things here for Catalyst Center or Meraki, for example. You can click on an activity, which generally corresponds to an API call, and drag it onto the canvas. You can also add things like logic. So you can do condition statements. These are your if-thens or loops. And the great thing is there's no coding involved with this. So there's no special syntax to learn. You can easily drag things around to modify your workflow. When a workflow runs, you'll also see a visual representation of the logic of your workflow, so you know the success and failure of any given step. And you can also see the inputs and outputs of every activity along the way. So what can you automate with Cisco workflows? Well, to start off with, anything with a REST interface. So right here at the top, you see HTTP endpoint. So anything with a REST interface, you can have Cisco workflows talk to that. Below that, you see things like Ansible, and down at the bottom, you see Terraform. So if you already have some existing automation, that's great. It's not throwaway work. You can trigger those from inside of Cisco workflows. Then you start seeing the Cisco domains, Catalyst Center, Meraki, Catalyst SD-WAN, ICE, Umbrella, for example. So all the Cisco domains are here and more are coming. And then you start seeing the third-party tools as well as AI integrations as well. So you can have an open AI activity, for example, inside of your Cisco workflow. And then down at the bottom, you also see a terminal endpoint. So if I can't reach it by REST, but I can talk to it by SSH, I can add a terminal command here. So those CLI devices that I want to manage, I can still do that with Cisco workflows. How can I trigger and run a workflow? Well, one of the great things we have here are automation rules. And so these are ways you can automatically trigger a workflow, and that can be either based on a schedule, like a cron job that runs every Monday morning at 9 a.m. or on the weekends at 2 a.m. You can have a webhook rule. So a network alert can use a webhook to trigger a workflow, or an email rule, which monitors an email box when an email comes in to trigger a workflow. The great thing about workflows is there's AI integration here. So using the AI assistant inside of the Meraki dashboard, I can now ask the AI assistant for an outcome rather than just asking it for help. and it can go into my workflows environment and then recommend a workflow for me and then guide me through preparing the prompts or the inputs for that workflow. I still maintain the control over the changes that workflow will make to my network before I approve that workflow to run. And the great thing about using a workflow is the workflow is deterministic. So if I give it the same inputs, I always get the same outputs. So I can have confidence in running that workflow and having it make changes to my network. You don't get that when the AI just randomly decides to choose an API to run to make a change to your network. So having workflows integrated with the AI assistant here is the best of both worlds. So how do you run a workflow? Well, of course, you can have it manually, the automation rules, the AI assistant, or an API. So you have complete flexibility here when you want to run your workflow. So how do you get access to workflows? Well, the first thing is it doesn't cost anything. This is included for being a Cisco customer and included with the licenses for any of the Cisco management platforms. So even if you don't have any Meraki devices or licensing, but you have Catalyst Center, Catalyst SD-WAN, ICE or Umbrella, for example, you have to go to the Meraki dashboard, create your Meraki organization, but with no devices, no Meraki licenses, you can access the workflows environment there and begin automating things like Catalyst Center, ICE, and Umbrella, for example. So there's no risk to adopt and deploy this, and you get full access to all those Cisco adapters and automations. We're currently deployed in the Meraki dashboards in the US, the EU, and APJC. We're going to be deploying into the Meraki geolocations for Canada, India, and China very, very shortly. And then later on this year, for the US environment, we're going to be going into the FedRAMP environment as well. If you're going to be talking to on-premise controllers or devices, that does require the deployment of what we call a remote VM. That's a 2 virtual CPU virtual machine you download from the targets area inside the automation dashboard. Install that currently on vCenter. It calls back up to the cloud, establish the connection there for us to proxy messages down to those on-prem devices or controllers, and you log into everything through that single sign-on account with the Meraki dashboard. So a couple of questions that I frequently get asked, so hopefully you can help me answer some of these. The first one is agentic workflows only for Meraki? And hopefully everybody right now is shouting no. It can be automated across the multiple Cisco domains as well as third party. How do you connect those on-prem devices or controllers? Everybody should know here, you deploy a remote VM, that 2 virtual CPU virtual machine. You can download that directly from the Meraki dashboard or the automation dashboard inside of Meraki. Does workflows count against Meraki API rate limits? I hear this a lot from customers who are really heavy Meraki automation users. So currently, yes, it does, and we're working on this. But there's also the Meraki adapter that interfaces between workflows and the Meraki APIs, and that adapter does handle the retries up to several times. So if it gets back a 429 error, for example, it will retry up to 5 times before it reports an error back to the workflows environment. So it helps you overcome some of those API limitations. And then how do I limit permissions on a workflow? So currently, to access the workflows environment, you do have to be a full Meraki organizational administrator. However, more granular role-based access control is coming to the Meraki dashboard as a whole, and we're going to be picking that up as part of the workflows environment. And one of the things we have coming out is a network ops persona that will only have the ability to run workflows that they are granted permissions on. So they won't have the ability to create workflows or create targets or access workflows, edit workflows, but they'll be able to run workflows they're given access to. We'll take a look at a roadmap. These are some things that we've delivered in the last quarter. So one of the things that I'm most excited about is the AI-assisted workflow generation that's currently in alpha. So I can have a natural language conversation with the AI assistant and have it create a workflow for me. So no more clicking and dragging. And I'll cover some more details on that briefly in a few more slides. Other things we have is the auto Meraki target environment. So workflows is embedded directly inside the Meraki dashboard, and now it has native knowledge of the Meraki organization it's a part of. So right there for a target, it automatically creates a target for the hosted Meraki organization that's interfaced with. We also added improvements to the user prompts. So this is 2 different ways you can add a human into the loop. The first one is an approval task, and the second one is a prompt. So approval task just says approve or reject for a workflow to pause and get approval to perform its actions. And the second one is a way for a workflow to go out and collect information and then present that information to the user before the workflow continues running. And so email tasks are now integrated with that. So the workflow reaches that stage, it sends an email out to the interested parties, and they can then click the link to be taken directly to the workflows environment to respond to that prompt. Great thing here, we also added full API support for the Meraki API key. Previous to this, workflow had a separate API. Now we're directly integrated with the existing Meraki API environment, so you can utilize the same Meraki API key. And we also have a new unified remote that covers both the Meraki workflows environment as well as Cisco XDR. On the integration side of things, We added new integrations for Netbox and Thousand Eyes, as well as new activities for Catalyst Center. We expanded that with over 700 new activities that correspond to individual APIs. And Netbox, actually, we added over 75 activities for Netbox as well, and a couple of use cases that came from the Cisco team. And we also saw a number of use cases come from the community as well. And those are all added into the Workflows Exchange. What are we currently working on? We're working on bringing out that AI-generated workflows into general availability. So that should be available in the next couple of months. We're going to be exposing AI to workflows. So currently, AI Assistant has knowledge of all the workflows inside of your workspace. We're going to be putting a flag on that so you can control which workflows the AI Assistant can see. So if you're currently developing a workflow and it's not ready to be discovered by the AI Assistant, you can turn that flag off so the AI Assistant won't be able to see those workflows that are still under development or under testing. We've got categories and foldering coming to the workflow editor, help you sort through those hundreds and hundreds of integrations and activities currently available for you inside of the workspace. Improvements for array actions, new activities and new integrations for Nexus, for ACI, improvements for the Python environment inside of workflows, as well as integration for info blocks and AWS. We're also going to be rolling out that custom role-based access control for operator level support. We're going to be adding into the China, the Canada, India geoclouds in just a few weeks. And then also one of the other exciting things here is a Docker Compose version of the remote. So you'll no longer be restricted to just having vCenter. With Docker Compose, you can pretty much be able to run that remote on any supported hypervisor. And then a backlog of use cases here. Some of these are coming from the Cisco team, and we're seeing a tremendous interest from the community and partners who have been contributing workflows to our exchange, and we have a backlog now to get those reviewed. If you want to get feedback on what's missing from workflows, what you'd like to see improved in workflows, inside the Meraki dashboard, all the way in the bottom right-hand corner is a Give Your Feedback button. If you're in the automation area on any of the different tabs under automation, you click on that, that information goes straight back to the product team, and they read that stuff on a daily basis. So help influence what's currently in workflows and what's coming in workflows by giving us your feedback there. So I mentioned earlier, the natural language workflow generation. This is currently in alpha, super exciting. I could have a natural language conversation with the AI assistant, and the more details I give it and the more clearly I convey my intent, the better response I get back from the AI assistant. And just as you would or I would do if we were going to create a new workflow, the first thing we do, we start with our plan. What's kind of our pseudocode for our workflow? And that's exactly what the AI assistant does. It takes our initial input, it creates a plan, and then I can iterate this plan with the AI assistant by saying, hey, change step 2, modify step 3, remove step 4, add this other step. And once I'm happy with that plan, I can then have it generate that workflow. It'll dump that into the workflow editor for me. And I can go in there and review it, validate the logic, or if I need to continue to customize it, I can customize it using the workflow editor. So super exciting about that. If you're excited about workflows like I am, where can you go to learn more about it? Well, to start off with, you can ask questions in the workflow community. So that's under community.cisco.com. And we also have a YouTube channel for Cisco workflows. In here, we have some self-learning sample lessons, 11 different videos in there right now to get you started on using workflows, as well as demos of workflows from the exchange and other workflows that have been run using different use cases to solving automation challenges. Another great resource is the Cisco Live On-Demand library. So in here, we have a number of sessions from most recent Cisco Lives that cover different automation topics highlighting Cisco workflows. So please utilize that resource. And also, of course, the documentation area is available, all the documentation for Cisco workflows. And with that, let's jump into a demo environment. Let me just take my pause for a minute, catch my breath, and see if there are any questions that came in that I can answer.
Ed, thank you so much. One of my favorite things is the Cisco Workflows YouTube channel. I think they're very well done videos. They give awesome examples along the way. So I think it's a great resource. Thank you so much.
Thanks. So let's say I am a network engineer and I've been tasked with deploying a new wireless service in both Catalyst Center and Meraki. So I could start over here inside of Catalyst Center. Oh, and I see I've been logged out. So give me 1 second to get logged back into that. I spoke a little longer than I was planning. Okay, so I could start over here inside of Catalyst Center and go into design and network settings and find my wireless setting and look for my SSIDs and see what's configured there and begin doing configuration. And then, of course, I configure back over to Meraki and check the SSIDs over there, begin my configuration. But that was yesterday. Let's talk about what we can do today. So today I can come up here, bring up the AI assistant, and ask the AI assistant here for an outcome. I'm going to say run an automation that deploys a unified wireless network service on both Meraki and Catalyst Center. So it's going to look into my workflows environment here. It's going to find a workflow, recommend a workflow for me, and show me the steps involved in that workflow, and ask me if I'd like to proceed. After reviewing those steps, I can confirm I would like to proceed with that workflow. It's now going to dynamically generate an input form based upon the inputs for that particular workflow. And I can modify any settings that are defaulted for me. I can come in here and provide the missing information, make my selections from other choices. I'll go to pre-shared key today. WPA2, continue. And because this workflow will make changes to my network, the first thing the AI system wants to do is have me confirm those settings. I can review all the settings here. I can confirm those settings. And now this AI system is going to trigger that deterministic workflow that in this case is going to go out and can perform configurations not only inside Meraki, but also inside my Catalyst Center environment as well. It's going to be provisioning a new wireless service in both of those environments for me. It shows me progress along the way for the steps of my workflow. And in about a minute or so, this will complete and give me a full report of the configuration of both the Meraki and Catalyst Center wireless configuration that it performed for me. So much quicker, much easier than trying to swivel chair between two different dashboards. And of course, the live demos always take a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'll say configuring SSIDs on this
There we go.
infrastructure does take a little time if you're doing it yourself. So it's awesome that you're streamlining it into one nice cohesive system. Cool.
Yeah. So here we go. We got the full outcome back here. It tells us that it successfully executed this workflow. It gives me a summary here of the Meraki configurations that it performed, as well as information about the Catalyst Center configuration right down here, Catalyst Center Wireless Network, and then recommendations for next step. Let's actually confirm that it actually did perform those steps. I'm going to refresh my view over here inside of the Meraki dashboard. Hey, here's my new marketing SSID, which was previously unconfigured. Jumping into Catalyst Center, I only had one SSID previously. And if I refresh, I should have my marketing SSID. And again, I have the ability here to jump into that view run details of the workflow itself, which actually shows me a visual representation of the workflow. And I get the graphical representation of the branching for the workflow. Here I see that both the Meraki and Catalyst Center were run in parallel and all steps were successful, but I can drill into the inputs and outputs of any single step along the way. So that's great. That's wonderful if I want to do either through an AI assistant or through a manual run of a workflow. But what about network automation? What if let me jump over to a different environment here. What if I want to do things like automatically respond to network events? So say I have an environment over here. Let me jump into a different network where I have some access points and cameras. And generally, my first step along the way with these types of devices when they go down is have a network engineer figure out which switch port they're connected to and then bounce the power over Ethernet to see if I can recover that device. And sometimes for cameras, I got to bounce that device twice before it comes back up. But that takes time for the network engineer to receive the alert, act upon the alert, figure out which switch port it is, connect in, bounce the device, wait for the device to come back up, check it, and then try to bounce it a second time, potentially for a camera, and then wait for it some time to come back up. So that's probably like 30 minutes or so of downtime for a network engineer to do those tasks. What if we do that stuff automatically? So I'm going to grab a webhook, and I'm just going to trigger this one manually. But here's my webhook, and I'm going to send into the environment right here. But as we can see here, this was a camera. Right here, it's an MV23. Let's see, right here, alert type camera went down. Here is my workflow environment. So again, this will be triggered automatically from a webhook configured for a Meraki event alert. I'm going to go into my history inside of my workflows environment. I see I just had an event come in right here at 122. Again, this is an MV23. Cameras went down. It did trigger a workflow. I can look at that workflow right here. I can see that this workflow is still running. But I can look at that workflow again. I see the details that came in here, but I can go to the run details. So here I see at the bottom here, blue, that means that those steps are still running for this workflow. But up at the top here, I see it received the Meraki webhook. It parsed the webhook successfully. It came down here. It got the connected Meraki switch. And again, I can drill into the inputs and outputs of any step along the way if I need to. After it got the Meraki switch, it then attempted to bounce the Meraki switch port. And again, this is the first bounce attempt right here. It actually did bounce it successfully, and we're at success. In the case where it had, failed to bounce it this successfully the first time around, if I go into the modify environment, I went to that workflow editor now, I can scroll down here. I can see that after my first bounce attempt, I have a second bounce attempt where I attempt to bounce it right here. And in here, if the device doesn't come back online, I have a placeholder for adding tier 2 activities where I could come over here and say, open a ticket in ServiceNow, or open a ticket in Jira, or send an email, or post to a WebEx or Slack space. Hey, this device went down. The tier 1 escalation steps were already done. It's time for tier 2 escalation. Here's the summary of those activities. So a lot of great power here on being able to automate common network operations. So again, it's all about using workflows to make APIs simple and easy and eliminate those repetitive manual tasks. So that's a quick overview and demonstration of Cisco workflows. And I think I'm going to pass things off to Jamie for a more exciting demo.
We'll see if it's more exciting or not. All right. So here's a real world example of how workflows actually really good segue from Ed. A network automation task that would have typically been somebody on a network ops team receives an alert, sees something's wrong at a location, and actually needs to take action on that alert. So in this case, again, real world example, retail customer who has a few thousand stores nationally. No surprise, one of the most important things for a retail customer is being able to take payments and process credit cards and point of sale transactions. So this customer came to us and said, hey, we need to one, monitor our point of sale transactions, and two, if there's a problem getting from our store to our point of sale provider, we need to do something about it. So in this situation, we have this is a demo example, but a real world version of this does exist. I have two stores here, two retail stores in this customer, and we have they're full stack Meraki customers. So this is all going to be a Meraki dashboard plus the integration of ThousandEyes. So ThousandEyes, if we're not familiar, is our network performance analytics product, basically, right? We're going to test end-to-end connectivity between one location and another. One of the really cool things is we have the ability to run a ThousandEyes agent on every Meraki MX or SD-WAN appliance out there. So what we've done is we've configured the MX appliances in this customer's network to run the ThousandEyes agents. We do that through active application monitoring and dashboard. And this connects these individual locations to ThousandEyes. So each of these locations for this in this example has a broadband connection and a cellular connection. Normal operation of business, we're going to use our broadband connection. We're not going to worry about the amount of traffic going over that connection. But in the event that for some reason that location can no longer reach our point of sale provider, we're going to use the data from these ThousandEyes agents to make a decision about what to do with that traffic. So we have two stores here reporting up to ThousandEyes. So we're going to look at the ThousandEyes dashboard now. So we can see these two tests that we have running against two of our point of sale provider IP addresses. We can see the performance of these tests right here. We're not seeing any packet loss. We have relatively minimal latency, and we also don't have any alerts triggered for these two events, these two providers. So let's take a look at what these providers actually look like from a ThousandEyes perspective. So the information we get from ThousandEyes, just by virtue of running these agents on those MXs, is a path from each one of these stores all the way through the internet to the end IP address of this. Happens to be WorldPay. You can see in our in the example here, WorldPay is the payment provider. So every hop across the internet we have visibility to now. So that's cool. What does this test look like? So from this ThousandEyes test, we're actually going to be running a test against TCP port 443 at the payment provider from every store that this customer has. And in the event that something happens, we want to know about it. So historically, we would create an alert for this. And this alert defines what our metrics and thresholds are for a particular event. So we now have, in this case, we have an alert set up for the two tests that we have running. Our metrics for these alerts are 30% packet loss, and in this case, 250 milliseconds of latency. We don't ever want to cross that threshold, no matter what happens, right? And this could be an issue with that connectivity along the path from the retail store to the ISP, but it could also be somewhere in the middle in some sort of peering point between two ISPs before we even get to that point of sale provider, right? So we have an alert set up, and typically we would get an alert. It gets sent off to a NOC. The NOC says, cool, I got an alert. Now I have to go investigate what's going on. I have to, make rule changes, move traffic around, whatever it might be. What I've done here is we now have, we can also send an email, but instead of actually sending an email, we actually have a webhook set up to trigger a workflow that Ed was talking about. So this is a rule in workflows that says, if I receive an alert from Thousand Eyes, let's do something with the traffic for that particular location in Meraki dashboard. So let's jump back to dashboard here, and we'll see now in the workflows automation space, we have a workflow called point of sale traffic uplink failover. So when we receive a webhook from Thousand Eyes to workflows, we're going to take a look at that webhook, determine a few things, but most importantly, is this a bad thing? So we do need to move traffic off of our primary uplink to our cellular failover link. And also, which store is this affecting? Which retail location is this affecting? So we're going to pull that information out of that webhook. And then we're going to determine, is this I need to move traffic away from my primary uplink, or the condition's cleared and I need to move it back. So we have some logic defined in here to whether it's active or inactive. Inactive moves it back. Active alert moves the traffic to the cellular uplink, for example, in this case. And this is actually where I'm leveraging workflows to trigger some Python code. So we're not using the full, drag and drop abilities of workflows. We are to actually bring the automation in play, but I actually have a Python script here that is actually running all of this automation for us. So I think this is a good example of, depending on how your level of understanding of anything is, you can actually integrate that into workflows and use workflows to your advantage in either way. So I'm going to jump back and show you exactly what we're going to do with this information real quick, and then I'll give you a demo on what this looks like in the process. So what we're going to do in here is, from the MX's perspective, we're actually going to create a rule here in this internet traffic policy that says, I'm going to take all the traffic from a particular subnet in my location, which happens to be my register or point of sale subnet, move it over to my cellular uplink in the event of a failure. So right now we don't have any policy here. We're following, in this case, our primary uplink, which is our broadband uplink, WAN1. But we'll see this change in just a moment. So I'm going to pop back to our overview page here, and then we're going to actually introduce a little bit of artificial latency here. So we're going to create some delay from these store locations to our payment provider across one of our uplinks. And this happens to just be an open source provider. So we come back over to Thousand Eyes, and we can see now that we have a retail POS provider alert triggered, right? So we can see that our latency jumped up to 1400 milliseconds at these locations. We created an alert on that. And now if we come back to dashboard, we're going to see that I now have some tags on each of these networks. So what happened is we saw that there was an issue with those uplinks. We sent an alert over to our workflow. Workflow said, okay, cool, I'm going to trigger this failure event, which in this case puts a tag on the network so we know it's in failover mode. And also there's a little bit of back-end magic happening here to only affect a particular network. So if we're using templates, for example, we don't want to affect every network and every template. We only want to affect one network. So we're actually going to remove that network from a template so we can apply this policy specifically to a network. And we're going to see what that policy looks like right now. So remember, there was nothing here before. Now we have a policy in here that defines, I want to send traffic from these particular subnets up to my payment provider IP addresses via my WAN2 link, which in this case is our cellular uplink, right? So any traffic that needs to go to, that matches these conditions, are now going to be sent over the cellular uplink. All the regular traffic in that store is still going out the broadband link. We're not utilizing extra cellular service or anything along those lines we're not going to overutilize the cellular service. So we're only affecting broadband traffic. So we can see we did this for both stores. Both stores have different source networks. So we can look at the workflow here that ran to actually trigger this. So we see two actual events here that got triggered from workflows. We see the workflow, every green event is a successful execution of one of those steps. And we can actually see that it executed against 2 different networks. So we see store 11, and then we also see it executed against store 22. So one webhook run ran against 2 different stores that were having the same problem. So let's go back to Thousand Eyes. We can see that we actually do have 2 alerts here now. So we actually did trigger 2 alerts based on this failure. So let's revert this back to normal and show that we can actually go back to our normal state once that condition is cleared. So same deal. We're going to no longer have an alert registered in Thousand Eyes after a couple refreshes here. So we see our alert status clears. Our normal latencies back to 23 and 44 milliseconds, which is totally within our threshold. We're going to go back to our dashboard and see that we actually did another run of our workflow, which removes the traffic shaping that we had applied. And we'll jump back here to our network list and see that our tags are gone, which means we've reverted all of our changes back to our normal method of operation, which we're going to see here in just a sec, is we're just going to follow our normal default route out our primary WAN link. So we no longer have any policy applied here. So hopefully that's a pretty useful example. At least it gets the wheels turning on how you could possibly use webhooks to automate some things that might have otherwise been a bit more manual, or at least requires human intervention to make work. So back to I guess Drew.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. Great work. Awesome demo. Ed, you too. I think you guys successfully created new features and capabilities within the Cisco stack that didn't exist prior. And I think that's the big takeaway with workflows and automation tools, is that we can create new features without having to go back to us at Cisco and say, hey, come up with this feature and develop it. You can start developing yourself and solving your own problems within organizations. So I think this was very, very helpful. So now that's going to take us over to part 2, or act 2 of today's session. And I see Chris is already unmuted over there. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris at BlueCat Networks to talk about automation and how you guys interact with Cisco infrastructure as well. Chris, over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm going to kick off with just a couple of slides at the beginning and do a little bit of level setting for you guys. I own strategic alliances for BlueCat, have a lot of different interactions with vendors out there in the space, but a ton of my time is spent with Cisco and integrating into common workflows here. I'm joined today by a peer of mine, John Chapman, who's actually going to run some demos. So after I show you guys some slides and bore you a little bit with those, John's actually going to entertain you with a demo piece. Let me go ahead and get started just by talking a little bit about how the intersection between us and Cisco works. So right now we actually have a pretty broad portfolio, and I will say that with a little bit of interest, because obviously when we're talking about Cisco, our portfolio is nowhere near as big. But we're doing what we classify out as intelligent network operations as a business these days. So if you look at our product portfolio, we have some network observability products that are focused on things like flow analytics and packet capture over here toward the right-hand side. And we've got some really cool automation and AI-driven workflows to be able to help operators with these particular components, but these elements aren't exposed to Cisco GPL today. When we start talking about things that you can actually buy directly from Cisco, we actually have the vast majority of our product in that sort of container. So we have a product called Live Assurance here, which is really focused on doing operational health of firewalls in general, firewalls and load balancers. So your Cisco units, your Fortinet units, your PAN boxes, all of these different components, it's looking at the things that can potentially interrupt operation of these systems or make them perform less well. So keeping them up and running inside of your environment with tons of automation and AI-driven workflows for these as well. We've got our Edge product line, which is going to act as a first hop DNS piece inside of your network. So it's going to help you out with DNS segmentation. It's going to help you with forensics on all of your internal DNS traffic. And it's also going to do things like integrating into your Cisco DNS protection layers, whether those are Umbrella, DNS Defense, or secure access inside of those environments to give you a more full-featured view of what's going on both inside of your network and help you inform better policy externally. And then a lot of our conversation today, especially when we step into John's segment, is actually going to be focused on these DDI layers. So for those of you that DDI is not a common acronym for, DDI is the acronym of acronyms. It's DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. Here we've actually got two products that service different kinds of verticals for us predominantly, our Integrity product line and our Maestro product line that we're going to focus on a lot today. But let's talk a little bit about why automation is so important to this DDI segment. So if we look at things that our customers are interfacing with us on related to DDI, why are customers so interested in DDI today? Why is it a fast-growing space? And a lot of it really has to do with the fact that managing, especially your IP space and your DNS space these days, has become more onerous for a lot of businesses. Like if we step back in time 5 or 10 years ago, a lot of you probably were making less than 10 or 20 changes a week to your IP infrastructure or your DNS infrastructure. And it was fairly simple to manage, even with change control and change management that needed to happen back then. Now, as we've adopted more and more cloud workloads, as we've started to work into a lot of the automation kind of workflows that we're doing by triggering new AI instances inside of our own environments, the amount of change that we're seeing to our IP infrastructure, the amount of change that we're seeing to our DNS registries inside of the network is just a different order of magnitude. It's not uncommon for us to be talking to customers that are making hundreds of changes a day, or our biggest customers making thousands of changes a day to this kind of infrastructure. So if you think about having to control that surface and make it safe with change management and change control, if you're doing these things manually, it's an absolute nightmare for you. So when we start talking to customers about how DDI fits into this space, a lot of the initial conversation is, how are you onboarding new hosts? How are you setting up new segments? What do you do when you stand up new cloud workloads so that we can integrate with those systems and automate the management of that IP infrastructure and DNS infrastructure so that you're not having to make a bunch of manual changes that require all of that change management infrastructure, putting you on guardrails to be able to make this safe and ensure that you're not opening up new attack surface or reusing existing IP space and effectively taking down servers or segments. These are the big concerns that operators are looking at inside of this space. And then there's also some concern around what happens if we don't have proper control and proper management of our IP infrastructure. We open up new attack surface to a malicious actor out there on the network. It could be a much bigger problem for us than just down services. It could be a risk to customer data or PII or things of that nature inside of these environments. So getting good control on this is something that seems to be very critical to a lot of our customers. When I hand over to John, he's actually going to talk a little bit about how we're integrating with Maestro and Meraki together so that we can take control of the IPAM services on Meraki and extend that out to other types of systems that you may be using inside of your environments in the same way with our DHCP scopes. And a lot of this, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about being able to define a new IP scope. It's also about being able to attach context to those particular IPs. So a common example here would be things like, if you're a healthcare system, being able to quickly understand that these are systems that should be being added into our medical IoT environments, and then classifying those with the right intent so that we can communicate that, whether that is to the Meraki dashboard, whether that's to DNA Center, whether that's to a tool like ICE, so that you can set up the right kind of policies, both from a network performance perspective, as well as from a security policy perspective, becomes really important. Which probably also dovetails in a little bit into how we interface with some of the other areas of interest inside of Cisco. So like a lot of you guys are probably talking to Cisco about secure access and how that is really accentuating your SD-WAN strategy and helping to secure your host from the outside world. We have with that Edge product something that's going to help extend your visibility inward and give you control surfaces and visibility inside of the network, but it's also going to make your external policies better. So we're going to send up information about username and source IP address so that it can be used for your outbound policies at the secure access layer. When we talk about network segmentation, we just hit on one of these examples a moment ago. Here, it's all about us being able to maintain a well-curated list of information about all of your unauthenticated data, whether that's OT, whether that's IoT, whether that's unauthenticated cloud workloads, and being able to attach the right intent to it and then share that with the Cisco ecosystem so that you can use that both for your network and your security policies inside of the network. And then finally, we mentioned this one a little bit earlier as well with secure firewall, being able to drive these workflows, make sure that your systems are up and running, constantly performing as you intend, especially in a multi-vendor environment, is one of the advantages that we can impart here into the network. And then now I will actually flip over to John and let him run us through a demo of the Meraki product, and we can open up to some questions afterward.
Okay. Share off the screen.
And by the way, feel free to use the Q&A panel, guys, to ask questions. I'll be monitoring it while John is presenting.
All right, so you got my Meraki screen or my
We sure
screen?
do.
Okay, awesome, thanks. Okay, and this is one of our DDI products that we call Maestro, and it is an orchestration tool, meaning that it can manage a bunch of different DNS and DHCP, what we call services, right? And one of the services that we can manage is Meraki MX devices. It would be, setting up a Maestro server and then bringing in, say, like on DHCP, Meraki. And then what we would need is actually, the name that you want to give it, but the API key, right? And then we can ignore certain networks. So we do have a lot of customers, for instance, that want to manage their internal Meraki devices, but they have Meraki wireless access points for guest networks, and they don't want to bring those guest networks into the management system, for instance. And so we have the ability to block certain subnets. But as you can see, we do have Meraki. We actually have. I want to see the servers. We do have 2 MX devices within here. And so once we bring the Meraki devices into Maestro, it uses API calls with the Meraki dashboard, I guess you would call it, or the Meraki service. And we sync up not only the DHCP scopes, but also anything that Meraki knows about, and we pull that into the IPAM system. So if we go into IPAM, we can see that we have 2 DHCP scopes set up in our demo system. And if we dive down into them, the way the Meraki screen is laid out is, think of the left as like a big filter. So I'm looking at all IP addresses, but if I want to look at my DHCP leases, for instance, I can just filter on the state of a lease. Now, one of the things it's one thing to pull it into IPAM, right? IP address management, but then we can also make this one a DHCP reservation. We can create a reservation. So when this MAC address shows up again, it will always get this .6 IP address. I just give it a name, the obligatory test reservation. And this is actually interacting with Meraki. And so the next time that this MAC address shows up on the network, it'll always get that same IP address. And so that shows the interaction of not only pulling the information into the IPAM system, but being able to manipulate DHCP scopes and such like that up on the Meraki devices. And it is as simple as that, believe it or not. That is about it. Chris, anything else?
Sure. Yeah. I think, as I mentioned earlier, like one of the big advantages that we have here when we start talking about automation is that you guys probably have a lot of different systems that are touching your IP infrastructure, touching your DNS infrastructure. So the better that we can integrate with those different kinds of systems, the better we can understand roles and responsibilities and then roll that out to your broader ecosystem, the easier it's going to be for you to operate this kind of infrastructure inside of your environments. We very frequently see, especially when we're talking to our customers with the Meraki stacks, that they'll want to be able to take advantage of having us manage these DHCP scopes at the remote locations, the branch offices and things of that nature, but they're not necessarily using a Meraki MX to manage their DHCP infrastructure at their primary locations. So having this sort of centralized control plane that can both access your DNS servers that you have running at your corporate locations, whether those are bind, whether those are purpose-built DNS servers from BlueCat, whether it's Microsoft DNS servers or DHCP servers at those particular locations. Having this centralized control surface so that you know that the changes that are being made to your infrastructure are consistent with the way that you want to be able to drive your policies and your infrastructure becomes really important to ensuring that your network is operating in the fashion that you want it to.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much. And John, for that summary. We really appreciate it, gentlemen. And with that, guys, that wraps up the webinar for today. So on behalf of all the speakers and Cisco, we thank everyone so much for your partnership and for being a valued customer. And please do reach out to your account team to ask about workflows, to learn more about it. Go look at the content that Ed shared, as well as ask about how BlueCat can help you throughout your rest of your infrastructure. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care and have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Cheers, everybody.